Welcome back. This is my husband Brian, and we are doing our two-part to the kind of marriage talk that we're having. So we are going to just jump right in. We know that you guys value your time, and we so are thankful and grateful and appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to what we have to say and just allowing the Holy Spirit to just speak through us. So we do just thank you for watching, and we want to kind of talk about boundaries and expectations in marriage. So expectations, maybe we could start there. Do you want to start?
Is that your expectations?
Yeah.
When I first think of expectations, I think of when we went to a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because there was like some huge issue. We just thought it was healthy, and it is healthy to seek counsel. So went to this counselor, and we had a few sessions, and one of the first things that she talked about was like, in a marriage you want to establish boundaries,
Right.
and that was like her big spiel. You know, she was a marriage counselor, and that a Christian marriage counselor, and that was the first session, was to like understand and talk about the importance of boundaries. So that left an impression on me that like, wow, this must be important.
Yep.
So
yeah, boundaries and expectations was basically what we got out of that. I mean, like we didn't go a ton of times, but maybe a little backstory. My parents really just felt like it was important to have a relationship where you are able to openly talk about things, and knowing that sometimes it can be difficult. Why don't you go to a counselor when you're not in trouble, and learn how to talk and to communicate? And I feel like we really truly did.
Yeah, and honestly, like my first thought was,
we don't need that.
gee, thanks.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it was like just kind of eye-opening a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, why would someone go to counseling if they don't really feel like they need to go to counseling? But I think it was definitely very healthy, and it was very good for us.
Yeah.
And it's good for anybody, I think, to seek wise counsel and get wise counsel.
Boundaries can be in every area of your life. Even if you're single or married, it doesn't matter. Boundaries are super important. And actually, there's a Instagram handle that I follow. Brian is not on Instagram, so he doesn't know all about this. But there's an Instagram handle, and it's called The Holistic Psychologist. And she really talks a lot, about psychology. But one thing that she talked about was the boundaries, and some of the boundaries that you can set up. And so I'm going to talk about just really quickly. And she's saying there are 5 boundaries that you need: emotional, material, time and energy, mental, and physical. And so emotional boundaries are around, inappropriate topics, emotional dumping, dismissing emotions. And so you have to put up walls, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I feel like that's something that people, and maybe putting up walls isn't maybe the right thing to say, but I think that it kind of gets a bad reputation for when you say I'm putting up a wall, but it is a boundary. A boundary is a wall, and so you have to put those up so that you can protect yourself and possibly your family. Material boundaries around possessions, when they can be used and how they can be treated. So even just something like, my car cannot be used on the weekends, for my kid or something like that. Physical, touch, PDA, unwanted comments, and even saying things like, I don't find that type of stuff funny. That's something that you're allowed to say. These are boundaries. Time and energy boundaries, which I feel like this is one of the most important boundaries.
Probably the one that gets the most easily
let off.
Overlooked.
Yeah.
Because time's not really something tangible.
Right. Yep. And mental, freedom to have your own thoughts, beliefs, values, and opinions. So, if you need to write those down: emotional, material, time and energy, mental, and physical boundaries. We have to establish boundaries, and of course that can it can relate to a marriage too. How do you think boundaries would be related to marriage?
Well, obviously, like the physical part is
Mhm.
probably the easiest one, I think, to
Yeah,
relate to marriage because you're my wife. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's a bond that we have
Right.
that
No one
nobody
else.
else is allowed to have.
Yeah.
Um, the time and energy. There's things that I used to do on like if it was up to me, I would, well, maybe it is up to me, but I would watch football all Sunday
Mhm.
afternoon.
Mhm.
But is that a good use of my time?
Right.
Am I?
No.
Should there be some kind of boundary there?
Right.
Because like even today, I'm watching the Eagles game,
Mhm.
but Wyatt wanted my attention,
Mhm.
and so I tried to be aware of that
Yeah.
and to spend time with
Mhm.
him and make an intentional effort to spend time
Right.
with him.
Yeah.
The time boundary is, like I said, one that is easily overlooked because you often, I think, don't, when you cross that boundary of time, a lot of times that gets overlooked in the sense that like I don't even realize that I'm being disrespectful to you because I wasted your time, or I made a commitment and was supposed to be somewhere at a particular
Right.
time and I'm not. And sometimes, there's legitimate
Right.
reasons
Yeah.
for that, but when it's repetitive or whatever,
Mhm.
then I'm not really, I'm crossing the boundary of
Right.
time because it's a little bit maybe
Mhm.
disrespectful to you.
Right. And I also think boundaries with time are learning when to say no. There are
Yeah,
often
sure.
times where we want to say yes to everything. I want to go spend time with this person, and we would love to go and have a dinner with this couple, but there are times where you have to say, I have to have my boundary with my time, and figuring out the best thing for your family so that the time management you're not being pulled in every direction. Life isn't necessarily meant to feel like you're always super, super busy. And so putting boundaries on time and limits in some ways doesn't limit you. I don't know that I ever feel limited when I limit the time that I'm spending with other people and putting the boundaries up. And sometimes people, they don't understand it. They don't understand the boundaries. And we just have to continue keeping your boundary up no matter what.
Yeah, a lot of times I think when the boundaries aren't understood, it's because the expectation hasn't been set. Like if you don't know what the
Right.
expectation is, then you're going to step over all kinds of boundaries because you don't even realize that you're doing
Right.
it.
Yeah. And expectations, that's huge. Like the one funny expectation that I remembered when we early on got married, I can't stand to take the trash out. I mean, who does? It's like trash. It stinks. Nobody wants to take the trash out. And then it falls on the floor sometimes. You got to pick up the nasty trash, or there's a hole in the bottom, all that stuff.
It's because you put a clothes hanger in there.
Sometimes I do that, yes. Anyways, I remembered I would get so frustrated because he would keep pushing trash in there, and then I would, and I'm thinking, why hasn't he taken the trash out? But in reality, I never even told him that was my expectation. So I remembered after we had that counseling session, I remember talking to you about, I really don't like to take the trash out. Can you please take the trash out? And so that was the expectation, but then it could be met because he realized my expectation. But we can't read each other's minds, and I think that's what we forget sometimes is we think, oh, he knows that I don't want to take the trash out. Well, no, he doesn't because I didn't tell him, so that's important, is talking about the expectations.
Yeah. If I don't know what your expectation is, I mean, I don't know what your
Right.
hopes, dreams, and aspirations are. We
Yeah.
joke about that a lot.
Yeah.
And you've put all these expectations into your box, and then you don't give me the box and say, these are my expectations. Now, why do you have those expectations? Are they all going to get met? No, they're not all going to get met. Are some of your expectations unrealistic? Are some of your expectations unbiblical? Are some of your expectations because somebody else has that expectation? So I think a lot of it is like you expect something, but why do you expect it? And then what does it take to meet that expectation? But knowing what they are is definitely the first part of that.
Yeah, for sure. So, what's one expectation that you have for me?
I don't have any. No, I'm just kidding. I cook dinner on the weekends. I don't want to cook dinner during the week when I get home from work.
And we talked about that.
Yeah.
And so now I cook every.
Yeah, because I mean, when we first got married, that was one thing like you didn't want to do at all.
Isn't it funny how just things change? He can whip up anything.
Thank you, Mom.
Yeah, with all like any ingredients, and it's an awesome meal. And he's like, I don't know how this is gonna turn out, and every time it has been good.
And I can't duplicate it because I don't know what I put in it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we talked about that. We've talked about even just the simple things like the cleaning and all of that. And I do stay home, so most of that type of thing is left for me to do. And it's not because I'm the woman and that's what she's supposed to do. You know, it's because sometimes he will go and do the laundry. You know, there's things that he does, but that's not quite my expectation. You know, I don't expect him to do it. So when he does it, I'm like, yay!
And I think a lot of times we live in like this idealistic world where we have seen a stereotype, and then that maybe is our expectation, but it's not really realistic, or it's not healthy, or it's maybe unnecessary. Like, is my expectation that you're gonna every day when I get home, you know, the kids are gonna be perfectly clean, the house is gonna be perfectly clean, you're gonna iron my underwear, I don't know. You know, I think I have to be realistic. Like, there's a lot going on,
and when you bring kids into the mix, I feel like it is, for me anyway, a little bit more difficult. My expectation, even for myself, is that all of that would be like, minus the ironing of the underwear. That I would love for that to be like that every time he comes home, but I also have to set expectations for myself. And so the expectations aren't just for each other, they're for ourselves too. And whether or not we are gonna set realistic expectations for ourselves. And this kind of, I feel like, leads into compromise versus cooperation. You and I talk about this.
Thought you were gonna lead that into sex.
Wait, you just wait, boo. You just wait.
I'm gonna skip that.
Cooperation versus compromise. We hear often where people will say, how do you compromise? What's your take on cooperation versus compromise?
Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, just compromise. Like, you have a disagreement, come to some kind of compromise. You want to do this, I want to do that, compromise. And really, I mean, my honest view on it is, if you always compromise, then neither one of you ever get what you want. You just only get half what you want, or depending on how many people you're compromising with, less than half. And I think the idea of cooperation shows like a team, you know?
I like that,
We're a team, we're one. Compromise is basically you have two adversaries and you each have a different goal. You each have a different desired outcome, and then you give a little bit to get that part of that outcome, and then you give a little bit to get part of that outcome. And when you cooperate and you're doing things together, I think it allows you to be one. Like, you're not against me. If I'm always feeling like I've got to compromise, then really I'm thinking it's me versus you. And I think that's an unhealthy way of looking at situations. Like, I don't want it to be me against you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a little bit of sacrifice that takes place when you are cooperating with each other, you know?
Yeah, I don't want that to come across as like, oh, if you cooperate, you'll never have to sacrifice.
No.
it's just I like the idea of the team or the
Yeah.
oneness. Of,
You need to talk about things in order to be able to cooperate. You know, if you're not even talking about them, you don't know the expectations. Another boundary, though, that I feel like is important is probably a mix between mental and emotional boundary of talking highly about our spouses in public and in front of kids if you have kids, because, you know, we don't need to be trash talking our spouse.
well, let's be real. How awkward is it when you're around another couple,
Yes.
and then one of them walks away or something, and then the other one's like, "Oh my goodness, they always do this," or they're, and it's awkward.
Right.
But it's also disrespectful, and so that is one thing that I feel like we're both pretty intentional about. Is I may have something negative I want to say about you or that I think about you, but I don't need to be airing that out
Right. Yep.
with other people. I expect the same from you. You know?
And honestly, the way I see it is, you know, in a marriage, let's talk highly, like, and for them to hear. Like, I'm not saying you need to intentionally say something so that your spouse can hear you, you know, but it is good. Like, I know I feel really good when I hear Brian across the room talking about something great that I've done. And I'm sure if he hears something that I'm saying, that he feels great. And you know, this isn't to say that you can't ever talk about problems and things that are arising in your relationship. You need to be able to do that, but there's a time and there's a place. And that's where the boundaries come in too, is there's a time if you're talking to your counselor about that, or if you're talking to your wise counsel, whether it's, you know, a trusted friend or a pastor or something like that, where you're talking about those things, but not in front of, you know, a group of friends and things like that.
Yeah, one of the verses I stumbled across this week was Ephesians 4:29, and it says, "Kind words give grace to those who hear." And if I'm speaking harshly about you or about anyone really, I'm doing the opposite of that. I'm not sharing grace. I'm not giving grace. They're not hearing grace.
Yeah. All right, so the next topic that we're going to talk about is sex and intimacy. So, what?
We are? No.
Yes. I know one of the questions that...
That's what you always talk about on Kindred Women?
Yeah, no, not all the time. One person did ask, how do you keep the fire alive? So, fire. We don't have to necessarily start there, but if you want to answer that.
I think one thing, honestly, this at first probably comes across a little bit shallow.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of truth in it, because I think every relationship starts with some type of attraction. And I feel like it's important for me to take a responsibility for myself to try to still be attractive to you.
Yeah.
That doesn't just necessarily mean a physical thing, but I feel like everybody over time is going to change physically.
Right, yeah.
And so, you know, you're my standard of beauty, right?
That's right, yeah.
So, over time, my standard changes. I have a new standard every day,
That's
right?
Good, babe.
But I think that we have a responsibility to the other person to try to still keep that attraction when it comes to the fire. You know, I want to be attracted to you, and I want you to be attracted to me. And I think it's real easy to get complacent or to be like, oh, well, I'm married, so like she's stuck with me, so I'm gonna do whatever. I think that's important. Like I said, and maybe that comes across a little bit shallow, but I want you to be attracted to me, and I know that I look different than when we first met. You look a little bit different. You look way prettier than when we first met.
Yeah, I do think it's important.
But also know that like I love you regardless, and I am attracted to you.
Well, I think that the reason why it's not shallow in what you're saying though is you're not just saying you better look good and you better look this way. That's different. You're saying that you are my standard of beauty. So what that means is that you are who I look at as beautiful. And so that is who I'm going to be attracted to. So it doesn't matter what you look like physically, how much you weigh, short, tall, you know, my standard is for you, your standard is for me. And so I think that's why it's not shallow in what you're saying.
Yeah. As Mark Driscoll would say, maybe you used to be into skinny, now you're into formerly skinny.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you were into full head of hair and now you're into whatever.
Yeah.
In that regard, your standard does change.
Yeah.
But I think that kills the flame a lot of times.
Yeah. And I think pursuing each other is important. You know, I think we hear often that the man is usually the one who is thinking about sex more or wants to have sex more, and that's not always true. It's not always true. But, you know, I can't always just be expecting him, and this goes back to expectations too, I can't always be expecting him to be the one to pursue me. How is that going to make him feel? How is that going to make your wife feel if you're if it's always, I'm the only one pursuing, I'm the only one pursuing? You know, it's nice to feel pursued and, you know, for me to walk by and smack on his butt like he does mine, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, I think some of it also, like the flirting / joking about things. You know, I joke around a lot.
He does, and it's funny.
It's funny sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I'm just like, funny. I roll my eyes, but I think
but
that
I still try
too.
to like be a little bit flirtatious. It's not like, hey, I'm gonna make a awful joke all the time. But you know, there's different ways to show that I'm still interested in you.
Right. Yeah.
Be intentional about creating that time.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I might want to stay up and watch a Monday Night Football. That might mean that after the game I'm going to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, you have that expectation of how often it is or whatever.
Right. Well, and I know sometimes we don't always feel like it. You know, I might be tired. I might have a headache. I mean, come on, ladies. Like,
I might be tired and have a
headache. No, you know, yes, sometimes that is true, but it's like one of those things where you, like you said, you have to make intentional time for it. And the frequency at which you do it during the week, how many times, you know, that is up to you. I know we have heard 4 times a week is something that's healthy. You know, does it always happen 4 times? No, but you have to think about why isn't it happening more frequently? That's kind of, I feel like, one of the questions to ask. Why am I not having sex and intimate relationship with my husband more often? And, you know, it may mean that the schedules are different. It may mean that your husband is on deployment. Like, there are definitely things, but you have to think about that kind of question. I feel like for myself, the more we are intimate together, the more it makes me want to be intimate together.
Also, as far as keeping the intimacy still there, obviously if, like, you're having lustful thoughts about somebody else, or I'm having lustful thoughts about somebody else, and that's going to put a big puts a big damper on it. And so, you know, in Job he says, I made a vow with my eyes not to look at a woman lustfully. You know, and that's something that as men we need to take seriously.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
I think a lot of times when there are very infrequent intimate moments, it either opens up the door for that, or there's not intimate moments because that's already happening.
Right.
So I think that definitely helps keep the fire going, like knowing that you and I are one, and that I have complete faith in your faithfulness to me.
And sometimes, just like what he said with being intentional with the time, that sometimes means, okay, you know, it's funny, sometimes he'll send me a text message or I'll send him a text message, and a lot of times it'll be a funny one, you know, a funny meme or something like that, but it is an expectation of, this is kind of what I'm expecting tonight after you get home from girls' night or after Bible study. Then my mind is going there. My mind is going to be there. I'm going to be ready for that. Whereas maybe if I am tired, or I have to get up early, and so now I would like to go to bed earlier, you know, now I have set that sometimes it is a little bit of a sacrifice. That, okay, maybe tonight I really did want to go to bed a little bit earlier, but now I'm not. And God's going to bless that because he's blessing our intimacy.
Yeah, I think one thing that is not always possible for everybody because of the situation that they're in with their job or whatever. Like, we go to bed the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while we don't, but for
Right.
the most part, we go to bed the same time, which is way too late.
I know.
But part of that is because I feel like it is important for us to do that. And that doesn't mean we go to bed the same time because, and I'm doing it because we're gonna have sex.
Right, yeah.
I think in general it's good that we do that because we're kind of putting an end to the day at the same time.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of maybe an intimate moment just laying in bed together.
Cuddling.
I hate that word. I don't know why.
You don't like cuddling?
I don't know. I don't like that word. I don't like snuggling.
Oh, I thought, I was just about to say, well, if you don't like cuddling, then I'll say snuggling.
No.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really funny. I feel like intimacy can kind of lead into mental health. You know, there's a level of intimacy when you're being vulnerable and open with your mental health. And, you know, we've talked a little bit about counseling and the importance of that. And, you know, if you know that your spouse is dealing with things that they feel like they can't deal with or handle, you know, encouraging them and urging them to go to a counselor is extremely important.
By no means is going to counseling mean that you're like some failure.
Right.
It's probably the opposite because it takes
courage.
It takes a little bit of courage, I think, to say,
I've got something going on.
Get help from somebody.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about time and being intentional with time, and that it's important to spend time together. So we try to do a date night 2 times a month. It doesn't always kind of go like that, especially if there's vacation or something in the mix with that. But we really try to have, and we have 2 babysitters. Usually it's my parents or another college age student, something like that. And we carve out that time, you know, and it doesn't have to be a specific day of the week, although it is kind of nice if it is, because then you know what to expect for that day. But we really cherish the time that we have by ourselves, and you get to almost reboot.
I know at first I was like, we're going to pay somebody to watch our kids. But I can tell you that, first off, the kids love it.
Yes.
They enjoy it. Second off, I feel like that money is well spent because maybe we change what we do on the times that we're going to be paying a babysitter. Maybe we change what we do just so we can still have that time together, but instead of going to dinner and spending that money at dinner, maybe we just go get coffee or even just go to a movie or do something a little bit different. Yeah. There's always people that will watch your kids, I think.
Another important thing that we like to do is do like little weekend getaways. And so it doesn't happen, it's not like you do it every quarter. If you want to, you can. But maybe once or twice a year, I feel like we try to take little getaways, and just so that it's a time away. If you can't necessarily get away and you don't have kids, you know, just carve out where there is no time for anything else except for the 2 of you, if you don't have children. And then if you do and you can't get away, you know, if you can get someone to watch the kids overnight to where you do feel like you're getting away. And I wanted to read something. Brian's cousin, her and her husband do little weekend getaway trips. And this is kind of something that he wrote on a post on Instagram, so I really wanted to talk about this. He says, marriage takes work. It's not easy. And for us, the chaos that comes with 4 kids leaves little time for us to work on our relationship. Our biggest challenge is dealing with life in general and the craziness that can come with 6 different personalities living in one home, which is why getting away from that periodically is so critically important. And so they went on a trip, and he said, this trip all started this time last year when I planned out the year. Okay, so he's being intentional with the time, guys, to get away with her on several trips without the kids and several trips with the kids. If I hadn't had a specified goal, it might not have happened. And then he said, it's been an amazing weekend so far. We've got one more day by ourselves. Here's to being intentional. And I just love that. You're pouring into the relationship. You're pouring into your spouse. And you're making them feel cherished and loved. I can tell you that the amount of times that we have gone and we've come back, we have been able to give so much more back to our kids, to our family, to our friends, because we have been refreshed. So it's good for just really all areas of life, just to be able to rest and relax. Yeah. Finances are a huge thing that can cause friction, problems in marriage. So one thing that we have created is a budget, and maybe you could just tell the two books, or if you don't know the books, maybe you could just say the authors of the kind of things that have helped us with our budget.
So probably the obvious one is Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
So we did Financial Peace University. Andy Stanley did a series called Balanced, and that was very good as well. So basically his thing is like, you spy on your money. Mm-hmm. Where is it going? Where is your money going? You can make better decisions about where your treasure is, there your heart is. Yep. So that kind of tells you where your priorities are a little bit, and then you need to rebalance. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a budget person. I don't typically like to have restrictions. I mean, that's maybe people are okay with that. I'm not. I don't really love that idea. But, we have realized the importance of that. And, we have an app with Dave Ramsey, and we use it. And then there's times where we don't. And that's just, it's kind of the ebb and flow. Like, you do really well, and then you don't. There's people that do really well all the time, and that's great. But I would like to be, closer to that. And sometimes that kind of helps with the balance, so to speak, where you're not leaning too much on keeping all of our money or going and just spending it all. You need that, where he was talking about balance in the middle of, it's okay to have nice things. It's okay to spend money on, things that you want, as long as you're kind of budgeting for that. And so it really, I feel like, has improved our relationship as far as, we used to argue about stuff. He doesn't find some of the stuff that I want necessary, and that's okay. We give each other an allowance, and we get to spend whatever we want on that. I feel very strongly that it's important to do it this way. Okay, you don't work now, but even when you did work, it wasn't, sorry, you do work. You don't get paid to
Thanks,
work.
Babe.
Yeah. Even when you did have a paying job, it wasn't like you had your paycheck and I had my paycheck. Like, we're one, we're a unit, and we have one pot of money. Mm-hmm. That's the now we divide that pot of money up in different ways, but I don't have my money and you have your money, and then that's it. But you do have certain amount of money that you can spend, and I don't care what you spend it on, and I have a certain amount of money that I can put in the freezer and not spend. and
I know, he saves it, and then I'm like, how do you have all that money?
But I think that's important. Yeah. And then if there are certain situations where you want to spend more than whatever that allotted amount is, there's certain amounts that we come together and discuss. Yeah. And I think that amount's different for everybody based on their financial situation and maybe their own preference. And so, but I think that it's important to kind of come up with that rule, if you will, or that boundary. And tithe is important. We have tithed since we got married. Yeah, that's one thing that, I know that was instilled in you and me from an early age, but that was never really a struggle for us. So then after the tithe, then where you kind of realize maybe you're being a little selfish is in your giving, which is a little bit different than a tithe. Yeah. So we tithe, each month, and we give that money back to God, not as I'm going to get something back in return, but this is out of reverence. This is God's money. He's blessed us with this, and so we're giving back to Him. And we have seen the blessings for sure, and it hasn't always come in monetary ways. So we hope that you guys really
just got a lot out of what we've talked about today. And, you know, just know that marriage can be fun, it can be loving, it can be hard, and you just have to keep pressing in, keep putting God first, and keep communicating with each other. So let us know, you know, if this has helped you, if it's helped to change your life, and we will see you guys next time.